Hello, I'm Nicky Schiller. Welcome to the programme. London's Heathrow Airport says it is now fully operational after a power cut following a fire at a nearby electricity substation forced Europe's busiest airport to close for most of yesterday, causing travel chaos for tens of thousands of people around the world. In the last hour, the airport's chief executive has told the BBC he is proud of how it dealt with the chaos. Well, this is the scene live at Heathrow, where you can see one of the flights just coming into land. Dozens of them have been coming in from around the world this morning, including Washington, D.C., Paris, Doha, Ho Chi Minh City and Amsterdam. Many of the early departures were to cities across Europe, including Oslo, Brussels, Stockholm and Rome. Well, this is the entrance to Heathrow, where you'll remember yesterday it was completely closed. Today, cars, taxis, buses are heading in with passengers. Those passengers have been warned to expect delays. About 90 British Airways services are expected to be cancelled during the day. That out of roughly 600 that are scheduled. Now, the power failure was caused by a fire at a nearby electricity substation. This is the scene there this morning. Now, police say there are currently no indications of foul play. Fire officials say that the investigation into what happened would focus on the electrical distribution equipment. Well, in a statement, a Heathrow spokesperson said, "We have hundreds of additional colleagues on hand in our terminals, and we have added flights to today's schedule to facilitate an extra 10,000 passengers travelling through the airport. Passengers travelling today should check with their airline for the latest information regarding their flight." Well, as I mentioned, in the last hour, the chief executive of Heathrow Airport, Thomas Woldbye, has spoken to the BBC. My colleague Emma Barnett first asked him what the current situation is at the airport.
We don't expect any major amount of flights to be cancelled or delayed. We are operating as normal. We already have, I think, more than 150 flights that have been taken off on any busy day as the day today is, not just because of incidents of yesterday. It would have been a busy day under all circumstances. There are some cancellations and there are some delays. We are handling them in the same way as we would normally do.
So, OK, it's just because there's been reports around disruption expecting to last until at least the middle of next week. But you're saying everything is working as...
There are no disruptions as such to airport operations. Airlines, of course, have, as we just heard, have a tail of passengers who may be stranded, who need repatriation and so on, and airlines are handling that. But the airport operation itself is running as normal.
OK, I mean, and this in itself sounds a little bit like when you were speaking yesterday. You apologised for what had happened, but you've insisted that the power backup systems worked the way they should.
Yes, of course, we are sincerely sorry for the inconvenience that passengers have experienced. The power substation is not part of Heathrow's infrastructure. It is part of the electricity company's infrastructure. So we were handling the consequences of that failure. In our system, yes, all our backup systems were up and running. Our tower was running. Our runways were running as they should. But
nothing was working.
Our systems are not designed to power the entire airport. Then we would need a separate standby power plant on the side, and we don't have that. Heathrow uses as much energy as a city every single day. So we don't have backup power for baggage systems, fuel systems, things like air bridges and so on. So whereas the safety systems are working and we can get aircraft in and out, most of the airport infrastructure comes to a standstill when we need to reset, as we did yesterday.
Is that something you can continue with as the status
That's how
quo?
most airports operate. There's no change
No,
in that.
I know, but you've had this situation. It's the busiest airport in Europe. You're saying our systems worked as they should after this day of chaos. So I'm saying moving forward, what are you going to do differently?
We're, of course, going to look at what we can learn from this incident, but we also have to be aware that the incident yesterday was a major one. It was not a small thing. It was a significant incident. And when we have incidents of that magnitude, it takes time to reset the airport.
No, I don't think anybody's debating that. But if you look at, for instance, what the former British Airways boss, Willie Walsh, has said, how is it that critical infrastructure of national and global importance is totally dependent on a single power source without an alternative. If that is the case, then there is a clear planning failure by the airport.
But there's not a dependence on a single source. As we said yesterday, we have three substations that we're working with. They power different parts of the airport. When one go down entirely, as happened yesterday, which is unprecedented and which normally should not happen and which does not happen normally, don't forget, this was not about a Heathrow power station. This was also hospitals and homes and other areas that went down.
Yes.
That is a major incident. And when a major incident like that happens, don't forget, the airport didn't shut for days. We shut for hours because we had to reroute our power supply that requires taking down systems and powering them up again. And that takes time.
But there was one fire.
There is no failover or switchover in minutes.
No one's denying. But that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, how is it that is the system? How is it that there is no other ability to depend on anything else? It was one fire at one substation that took out Heathrow.
Yeah, as I said, we have other substations, but to switch them in takes time, and that is where the resilience is. Now, it's like a highway. You may have several lanes on a highway, and normally that is resilience enough if car stops or something like that. But if somebody takes out the entire highway, you have to go somewhere else for a period, and that's exactly what happened
Were
here.
you shocked yesterday?
I was shocked, of course.
Did you know that this could happen?
I was not shocked about the fact that we do not have backup power for every single system in the airport. I don't know of an airport who has that. So when you see,
but not every airport is Europe's busiest airport.
No, I agree. But building, we don't have. That would require, as I say, a separate power plant of a big size to be standby all the time, and we don't have that. We rely on the infrastructure around us. That's why we have three substations. That one goes out entirely is, as I said, unprecedented, and we have to live with the consequences. Now, we will, of course, look into this and say, can we learn from this? Do we need a different level of resilience if we cannot trust that the grid around us is working the way it should?
Thomas Woldbye, the Chief Executive of Heathrow, talking to Emma Barnett on BBC Radio 4's Today programme. Well, let's cross live to Heathrow, and our reporter Barry Caffrey is there. Barry, I've just seen on the BBC News Live page some pictures of big smiles from some travellers, hugs at the arrivals gate. So the airport open, but there is still disruption there.
There certainly is, Nikki, disruption, quite significant disruption today. British Airways, for example, have cancelled 80 flights in total to and from Heathrow Airport today. Just to kind of give you a little selection, at least 20 long-haul inbound flights have been cancelled. 6 outbound flights so far to Boston, New York, Riyadh, Dubai, Washington DC and Chicago have been grounded. And 20 British Airways short-haul and domestic flights have also been cancelled. Other airlines are affected too. For example, Turkish Airlines have cancelled flights to Istanbul. Brussels Airlines have cancelled flights to Brussels. There's been affected with Singapore Airlines. WestJet have cancelled a flight to Calgary and 2 flights to Delhi, one with Air India and the other on Air Canada, all cancelled. It's going to be a very difficult day, Nikki, here, not only for the cancellations, but also for delays. British Airways are warning passengers for those flights that will go ahead to expect delays. The other thing is the bosses at Heathrow Airport don't want people coming here too early. They should be arriving at the airport 2 or 3 hours ahead of their flight, depending on whether it's a medium haul or a long haul flight. But the advice for passengers is to check with the individual airline ahead of travelling to Heathrow Airport, because it's a very fast moving, fluid situation. Of course, so many of these planes and crews are in the wrong positions. We had a number of repositioning flights taking place yesterday evening from places like Glasgow and Gatwick and Manchester, but some of these planes are much further afield. For example, at Shannon Airport in the west of Ireland, in Barcelona, in Paris, and even some of them in North America. For those flights that were coming over the Atlantic Ocean, they made it nearly halfway across the Atlantic only to turn around and to be sent back. Some of those planes landed in different airports in North America too. So there really is going to be a knock-on effect, I think, not only for today, today, but going into tomorrow and probably into Monday and even early next week as well.
We've heard the chief executive defending what they did yesterday, but there are questions about how Heathrow was able to be knocked out by a single fire at one substation nearby.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So this was a fire, just to remind people, it was at an electrical substation in Hayes in West London, very close to here, which supplies Heathrow Airport. There was a major power cut. Now, it's not known at the moment what caused the fire at the station. The Metropolitan Police have said that there are no suspicious circumstances at this stage. We have, Nikki, heard too from the London Fire Brigade, from the Deputy Commissioner, Jonathan Smith, who said that the fire at the substation involved a transformer containing 25,000 litres of cooling oil. But you're right, there are questions about how this could take out a major international airport for nearly the entire day yesterday. There's also questions too, I think, around the resilience and the different measures that perhaps should have been in place. Some of the aviation experts are calling this actually embarrassing and are asking how on earth something like this could have happened. Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest airports in Europe and around the world, and so many hundreds of thousands of passengers being affected by this. How could have this been allowed to happen? And, you know, there's going to be questions around the resilience too.
Barry Caffrey live at Heathrow. Thank you. Let's discuss this more with Peter Syme, who's aviation reporter with Business Insider. Peter, thank you for joining us on BBC News. Have you ever heard of anything like this happening before anywhere in the world?
Thanks for having me. I can't think of another time where an airport, especially one of this magnitude and this sort of global importance, has completely shut down. It's been complete chaos. It's as you were hearing earlier, it's the fifth busiest airport in the world, but it's also the second busiest for international flights and the busiest in Europe. So it's had huge impacts around the world and around for airlines everywhere.
What do you make of the chief executive defending how they handled it, saying this would happen at any other airport?
Yeah, I was quite interested to hear the way he was talking about all of this. It's quite surprising, I think, to everybody who's observing the events of the past 24 hours that a failure at one substation has been able to shut things down. I'm sure that they'll be having to look into things a lot more closely and reviewing all of their plans to ensure that something like this can't happen again.
If we look at the disruption, which, as we heard from Barry, is going to continue, in the end, who pays for this and how much is it all going to cost?
So it will mostly be the airlines, I think, in the end. If you look at, because Heathrow is so busy, there was nearly 230,000 odd, 290,000 seats was the capacity of all the flights yesterday. And if, they're about 3/4 full, say, that's 220,000 passengers. And one of the experts who I was speaking to yesterday as well for some of my work was saying, that could be $100 million in revenue. And now airlines won't lose all of that because passengers will rebook for a later date, or they can be rerouted to other airports around Europe. But then, they've got accommodation costs. Some people will want refunds. It will be tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It's not quite clear yet, but exactly the figure, but we'll find out soon, I'm sure.
And what about the long-term implications? And in particularly, do you think it is a dent in Heathrow's global reputation?
I think it probably could be, yeah, unfortunately. I mean, Heathrow, it's as well, it's to come so soon after they got that sort of official backing for the third runway. This is an airport which is, it's vying for the top spots in the world. It's very important to the British economy. And for something like this, a failure of this magnitude to happen, people will be looking at it and say, how could this happen? But I'm sure that, the investigation will go on and they'll find out what happened and make the necessary changes.
Peter Syme, aviation reporter from Business Insider, thank you for joining us here on BBC News.